Thank you very much. My name is Sarah Lawrence and I'm a researcher at Allstate Northern Ireland. I'm going to be presenting today along with my colleague, Dr. Deborah Hunter, on a project that we worked on with a master's student who was looking at attitudes to the Covid-19 vaccine. As part of our role in Allstate, we typically explore data relating to the insurance industry. So we create models looking at consumer attitudes and behaviours. However, we're quite fortunate in that part of our role is also to engage with our universities. And this project was a really good example of how we engage with our universities. So at Allstate, one of the reasons why we collaborate with universities is because it makes good business sense. Our universities provide us with the innovations that are happening, and in turn we're also able to inform them of some of the challenges that we faced within industry. It gives us it gives them first-hand experience of what we find challenging. And for us, we learn new skills and we also get to contribute to the growth of others. We get to work on really interesting projects like this one. And by being generous with our expertise and our time, we find that it helps attract the top talent. So how do we do that? We have a culture within Allstate where it's embedded in such a way that we enjoy working with our universities. We have a universities engagement committee, which is set up to coordinate a lot of these efforts. And we're always looking for opportunities and how we can do more. So if you have an idea, please do reach out to us. Myself and Deborah's emails are on the screen, and we'll be really interested to hear from you. Some of the things that we offer are undergraduate apprenticeships. We offer master's student placements where students come and work on their projects with us. And we also have set up recently a scholarship which has lots of financial benefits for that person as well as a great opportunity for growth. During the pandemic, we have given guest lectures as well as specialist workshops for students. We typically do this in person as well as Zoom. And one example of this was an event that both myself and my colleague Deborah took part in for International Women's Day. And this was an event relating to the data analytics. My colleague Deborah as well is a founder member of the Data Analytics COP, which bridges links with the community as well, which bridges links with researchers both inside and outside of Allstate. So as I said, if any of this is interest, please do reach out to us. I'm now going to spend some time talking about this project, and I'll give you a little bit of background to it. So this was an example of a collaborative project that we undertook with a very bright student who was doing a master's degree in global public health. Hannah Healy, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, wanted to explore tweets and get a sense of attitudes toward the Covid-19 vaccine. And while Hannah was able to provide us with her expertise on public health, we were able to provide her with some expertise on how to run a project like this that involved a vast amount of data. And there are a number of reasons why this project was really worthwhile and really important. Firstly, while the creation of an effective vaccine offers a lot in terms of combating the global pandemic, the success of that vaccine is really only as strong as the amount of people who are willing to actually get the vaccine. And so we know that attitudes towards the vaccine play a huge part. And so for public health authorities to be able to respond, they need to understand what the sentiment is of individuals. Another reason why this project is important is because folks working in public health know that vaccine hesitancy is not a new phenomenon. In fact, it has existed back to the very first vaccines, such as vaccines for smallpox. But while it's not a new phenomenon, that doesn't make it any less of a risk, particularly because we know that if people have hesitancy towards certain vaccines, you can see a re-emergence of viruses that were previously under control. And when we think about COVID-19 in particular, we can also sort of recognise that that has implications for different strains emerging, and a delay in terms of us all getting back to normal, whatever that may be. And finally, this project was really important because we know that social media has become a key realm where people are expressing their views and their opinions. And at a first glance, on social media, we can tell that these views seem to be really polarized in terms of people for and against. But I suppose on social media, we get a real skewed reality because of the personalization of content. And what I see on my social media is not the same as what you see, and what you see is not the same as what someone else sees. So a key aim of this project was to take a step back and get a really objective view as to what the sentiment was in relation to the vaccine. And while social media personalisation may actually be contributing to some of this polarisation on attitudes toward the vaccine, I think that it also offers an important platform where credible content can be shared to help debunk some of the myths. I'm just now going to hand over to my colleague Deborah, who's going to walk through what we did for this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Okay, so this study that we have worked on, it uses data from Twitter to understand the attitudes towards 3 COVID vaccinations. Now, you may ask, why use Twitter? Well, Twitter is a social media platform that allows users to express their opinions in the format of 280-character tweets. And those tweets can include text, images, videos, and URL links. Now, Twitter was selected as the ideal platform of choice because it actually captures information at specific points in time. Now, the tweets used in this study today actually came from a pre-existing COVID vaccine chatter dataset. And this was downloaded from the Georgia State University's Panacea Lab. Now, this public dataset is perfect for open scientific research because it contains at least a year's worth of COVID-related tweets. Now, using this dataset, we have been able to focus on 3 significant dates in the COVID development vaccine process. Now, those dates are actually the days that the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the Johnson & Johnson vaccinations were granted approval by FDA for use in the USA. The dates are actually the 11th of December, and then we've also taken 2 days following to be our period 1, and that's the date that the Pfizer vaccine was approved. The second period starts on the 18th of December with 2 days following, and that's the date that the Moderna vaccine was granted emergency approval. And then finally, our third period begins on the 27th of February and 2 days following, which is when the Johnson & Johnson vaccination was granted approval as well. Now, these 3 dates provide us with an excellent opportunity to track reactions to each vaccine individually, and also to compare sentiments and attitudes towards each vaccine. And we can even actually gauge opinions to vaccines in general. So on this slide, we have an overview of our method. So first of all, we downloaded our enormous chatter tweet dataset, which begins on March the 11th, 2020. So that's the day that the World Health Organization declared a pandemic. Now, we actually intended to download our own tweets, but we ran into a few obstacles. First of all, Twitter only allows us to retrieve tweets of up to maybe 3,200 on a user timeline. And in addition to that, we can only retrieve between 7 and 9 days worth of tweets related to a particular hashtag. Now, there were alternatives that we looked into. You could purchase from Twitter, you could purchase from a Twitter service provider, or just simply find your own existing data set. So we hunted through the internet, and thankfully we did find this lovely COVID Twitter data set with at least a year's worth of tweets. Now, once we downloaded it, the work began. We soon realized that the data set that we have only provided tweet IDs. So this tweet data set actually required hydration using a Hydrator tool to give us all the tweet metadata, including the text. Now, once we have that hydrated file, we can then use our software to be able to clean it and remove tweets that were not relevant. And we did this for the 3 time periods that we have. Now, once we did finally clean our entire data set, we only ended up with about 30,000 unique tweets, and this is from a possible total of millions. Now, at this stage, we are able to perform sentiment analysis as well as emotion analysis to gain a bit more information into attitudes towards these vaccines. So the first thing to realize is that most tweet sets acquired by Twitter's API and third-party databases are actually what we call dehydrated tweets. Now, what researchers receive is just a plain text file with unique tweet IDs. And this needs to be hydrated to become meaningful. So to do this, we use the Hydrator tool, which we installed and downloaded from GitHub. This is just a desktop application. It just takes in a list of unique tweet IDs and outputs data corresponding to that from Twitter and gives us our text, which we're really, really interested in. Now, this Hydrator tool has the advantage of being able to handle Twitter IPA limit rates. It also allows us to pause and continue our downloads, and it gives us the option as users to convert our output not just as a JSON, but also as a CSV file, which we brought into RStudio. So this slide is the fun part. This is the pre-processing that we did to get it into a format so that we can do our sentiment analysis. So once we have our hydrated file, we use R to clean it and remove tweets that are not relevant. So that also includes all of these steps here. Now, the first thing we wanted to do, we only wanted tweets that were in the English language. So anything that wasn't English was removed. We also only wanted tweets from users within the USA. We also needed to keep tweets that had keywords related to vaccine and vaccination and vaccinated. We also performed some traditional standard text mining steps, which involves removing URLs, names, usernames, ASCII characters, punctuation, and so on. So a few more important steps. We should also convert all tweet text to lowercase, and then we remove duplicates using a fancy R package, and we also removed tweets that were retweeted as well. Now, once we did all this, we got ourselves a nice reduced data frame that contains about 34 columns of information. Now, one of those columns was user location, and we wanted to make good use of this. We wanted to be able to plot all the tweet locations on a world map. But unfortunately, with a lot of data sets, we had a lot of missing values, so we weren't able to do this as good as we thought we could. So in this slide, we're just sort of giving you an overview of why sentiment and emotion analysis is a very, very important part of this study. Now, sentiment analysis is used to classify the polarity of a document or set of tweets. And to do this, we have to assign a sentiment score. Now, a sentiment score can help express the opinion of the tweeter to be positive, neutral, or negative. Now, to obtain the sentiment score for each tweet, we first of all have to actually compute these emotion scores. And we do that using an R package, I think called Suishe. And we get these lovely sentiment scores, and from there we can then classify whether they're positive and negative or neutral. So we just simply wrote a function to do that. Now in R, these emotion scores consist of about 10 different ones. And all of those emotions include anger, anticipation, disgust, fear, joy, surprise, trust, as well as positive and negative. So we were able to do this with all 3 time periods of our data set, and we then were able to extract the most positive tweets for inspection and the most negative ones. So we'll get to the results shortly, and you'll find out what dominated. So another part of our study involved a little bit of text mining. And the reason for this is because we wanted to analyze the contents of our tweet text. So this text mining process actually highlights the most frequently used words in our tweets, and then these can be visualized in a lovely word cloud, which you might have heard of before. So word cloud also is called a text cloud or a tag cloud. So this is quite important for researchers because researchers can use it to report on qualitative data, and marketers can use it to highlight needs and pain points for customers. So the procedure to do this is quite simple in R. We use the text mining package TM, and we use the word cloud package. And then the next thing to do is to load the text as a corpus, which is just a list of documents, and then we clean it. So the steps for cleaning and text mining are very similar to the steps that we use to clean our data for sentiment analysis. So again, we remove white spaces, we change everything to lowercase, we remove stop words such as the and an that are just meaningless for our study, remove numbers and punctuation. Now, one additional step that we took was something called text stemming. So in our tweets, we have a lot of words like vaccine and vaccination and vaccinated. So we can get a common origin and reduce that down to one word like vaccine. Once we did this, we were able to produce a nice table frequency of words. So this actually came from our period 2 when the Moderna vaccine was approved. And you can see that there's certain nice words there. We can highlight, we've got safe, we've got Pfizer, we've got approved, we've got effective. So these are the words that are coming out as most popular in our tweets. Okay, so here we're getting to the results. Now, we found that our results for all 3 time periods, for all 3 vaccines, were very, very similar. Now, the most common sentiment that you can see here in blue is positive. The second, the negative sentiments, those that have been signed negative, are about half as much as that. So positive certainly dominates across all 3 periods. The most common emotion is in orange, that is trust. And trust accounts for about 22% of the remaining 8 emotions. To gain a deeper understanding of all this sentiment, it is actually really good to look at the contents of the tweets. So we actually ran a random sample of 10 tweets for each emotion category, which is shown here on the right. So we've got emotions such as anger and anticipation and disgust and joy and trust. And if you inspect them for all 3 time periods, you do find that they accurately represent those emotion categories. So this was good to see, and it showed that our pre-processing steps had worked out very well. So some even better news is that our sentiment results are actually in very good agreement with a recent publication by Joanne Shen-Lu, who performed a little bit of topic modeling on a more extensive time period. So she used the same data set, but instead of restricting to 3 time periods, she used the entire version. Now, this data set is actually updated every week, so it even extends even further than the last date there of February of this year. So Joanne identified 16 topics for modelling, and she was able to group these into 5 overarching themes. And the most tweeted topic happened to be opinions about vaccination. So this remained a highly discussed topic throughout. The figure there that we have on the left comes from our paper, and it is showing us the average sentiment score by week. So we can see here that the sentiment increases positively throughout that time period. And the p-values for this were very small, which suggests that this, is statistically significant, so the result is true. You'll also notice that the positive emotion on that graph peaks around November the 9th. That is a key milestone because that's the date that the Pfizer announced that its vaccine is to be 90% effective. So that's why we have that spike. On the same day, the number of tweets also became historically high. Now, on the right there, we have a breakdown of the emotions for that time period. And just like our results, they were able to show that trust, there in pink, is the predominant emotion. And that accounts for almost 23% of all the remaining emotions. So we had 22% in our data, so it matches very well. Another thing to note is that fear, which is in green, actually was a little bit higher than trust before April the 1st, but from April the 1st, trust then continually increased, and at the same time, fear decreased. Trust reached its peak about November 2020, which was around the date that the Pfizer announced its effective rate. And at that same point, fear, you can sort of see the reflection there, had a sort of a bit of a drop. So I thought that was very, very interesting. So the peaks here do coincide with milestones. I've just included this graph as well. So this is just showing the daily number of tweets from the day the World Health Organization declared the pandemic right through till the end of February 21. So this covers the first 2 periods that we covered, the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccination approval dates. So you'll notice that there is a first wave increase in number of daily tweets, and that occurs again in November. And then there's another sort of increase around between, I think, just after December. So that could actually coincide with the second vaccination approval date. And it also coincides when the news came out that there was another COVID variant, and that had been confirmed in North America at that time. The highest number of daily tweets actually takes place here at the end of January the 29th, and that's another key date because that's the date that the Johnson & Johnson vaccination announced that it was going to be 85% effective. So you can clearly see that the number of tweets regarding COVID vaccination it is driven by major events, in particular vaccine developments. And finally, we have our conclusion slide. So some of the main points from our results. Well, the sentiment analysis did show that there is a general sentiment towards COVID vaccine, which becomes increasingly positive with time. Our emotion results do show that trust continually dominates discussion on Twitter, and that had its peak in November the 9th, which was an important day. The percentage of tweets also increased, with spikes reflecting milestones in vaccine development. And it's nice to note that, the increasing positive sentiment that we have shown and the dominant emotion of trust, they may imply a higher acceptance of COVID vaccines compared to previous vaccines. So now I'm going to hand you over to Sarah to discuss the implications of this.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Probably just a few closing remarks in relation to what we have seen. So this type of research has been coined as infodemiology, and what this is using social media and data to inform public health and public health policy. And then actually, I think it has a lot to offer because it's cheaper. I mean, accessing this data didn't cost us anything because it was all widely available. The sample size was huge. We started off, I think there was 300 million tweets in the original data set. Where would you be able to access a survey that had that size of a sample, and particularly for free? And it's also fast-paced. You can get a sense of attitudes and information as it's happening, as opposed to having to wait, weeks or months for, a survey to finish or through other methods. So this type of research, I think, offers an awful lot, both to public health authorities as well as organisations who would be able to leverage social media. Again, if there's probably a few things that we could call out as well, just as we bring this session to an end. There was some next steps that you could do around this, and it's linking in other data to create profiles. So we talked about vaccine hesitancy and personalisation, and how this creates a real challenge for public health authorities, as they try to create messaging and try to get that message to reach the people that they want it to reach. There is perhaps, while we looked at the sentiment, there was an opportunity to go in deeper and look at, different demographic groups, who are the people who perhaps are the most likely to be susceptible to false information. And there's a whole piece of work there that could be done to kind of target those particular groups of people and ensure that they're getting the facts as well as their experiences of, the myths that we all know circulate on social media. So I think that's everything, and would love to have some questions. Thank you very much for your time. Oh. I'll get you on set. I'll get your mic. I think there should be a mic. Wait a second. That gentleman in the front.
Just in terms of filtering the data, bearing in mind it all went out at the one time, you've got a mass sort of global announcement in terms of vaccinations and their efficacy. Were you able to filter, for example, healthcare workers' tweets, which should be immensely positive in terms of these vaccines, or is that inclusive of, say, for example, 200,000 nurses in the US maybe going, great day for everyone, positive, great to see it, or was that inclusive in your data set and your analysis? Were you able to remove them to get a generalist public opinion?
From a healthcare, there was, whenever you download the data set from Twitter, there are a lot of variables in that allow you to cut. I'm not sure whether occupation would have been one of those that would have been included, but definitely would be a very useful, useful aspect that would help kind of understand that. Although, I think while healthcare workers, we could have the perception that the vaccine might, they might be very positive about the vaccine. I'm not sure necessarily that they would be. I think the population that make up our NHS are just like everybody else. There's different views and different opinions, within NHS workers as well as the general population. Not from the data set that we downloaded. Not from what? Can you think of any?
Yeah, I think we included everybody in the
Everybody.
USA.
Nice.
Yeah. But that is very interesting. We could have filtered actually with keywords and
Aye,
maybe trimmed
aye.
it down a little bit further.
Just in terms of where you got the data set, would there be many more?
In fact, that was version 72 that we used.
Yeah.
Yes. So the first data set, very small, only a month's worth, so it was more manageable to work with. And
Yes.
it does take a long time to use the Hydrator tool to hydrate to get the full text.
Yeah.
But yeah, plenty of versions out there.
Great job.
Thank you.
Sarah, how did you deal with bots that maybe might sort of try to affect influence?
That's a great question. Obviously, we know with social media data, there are bots have it, they create a huge skew. In this project, we had quite a short turnaround, and so we didn't really go into all of that, looking at how to screen out the bots. But we've been reading a couple of articles because it was something that really piqued our interest. And there are some techniques out there to help you, further clean your data. So you can get information from Twitter on, each Twitter user's usage. And what you can do is look at how often they are tweeting. So, I'm a millennial. We get accused of being on social media an awful lot. But if I was reproducing tweets like 3 every minute, even that might be a little bit too much for millennials. So you can use these types of techniques to see, how is this person using social media, and if it appears to be not actually a person but rather an algorithm that's tweeting just constantly, then you could, a next step would definitely to be able to strip out some of that and kind of further clean your data. There's always extra steps in terms of cleaning and screening, not just social media data, but any data that we work with. So yeah. We've been thinking about that and reading some papers, and we're considering maybe having a communities of practice event later on in the year or maybe early next year to try and look at that. So thank you.
Thank you.